So we've been starting the sessions with the Guru Slokas, and there are 4 that we use for our morning meditation and other big occasions, and there are 4 sessions, and we'll be doing the second one today because it's the second session. And I'll just say one thing about it before we chant it together in Sanskrit and English, as we normally do, and that is that in addition to being a description of what the Guru is, these great slokas from ancient scripture are, by definition, descriptions of who you really are. So enjoy your resume as it's laid out. Let's start with the Brahmanandam now. Brahmanandam paramasugatam kevalam yanamurtim dvandvatitam gaganasadrisam tattvamasyadi lakshyam ekam nityam vimalamachalam sarvadi sakshibhutam bhavatitam trigunarahitam sadgurum tvam namami. The greatest bliss, the highest joy, embodiment of wisdom absolute, non-dual, boundless like the sky. You are the goal of thou art that, one eternal, pure and still, witness of the whole universe, beyond mind's grasp of gunas free. To you, O Guru, may my worship be. That is one of my single favorite lines in all of Scripture, bhavatitam. It's like you get close to the end of this incredible list of qualities, and it says, oh, and if you think that you understand that, you don't, because bhavatitam means beyond the grasp of the mind. It can't be understood by the mind. Okay, let's go back to the full view of everybody, and we will jump into some stories. The great danger of doing this workshop for me is that I keep thinking of more stories, editing my list and adding more and more. So I'm going to start off with one that just popped into my head the other day that wasn't on my master list. I encourage all of you to do something like this. It may not be the method that works for you, but I just kept a little list all these years, not spelling out the stories, just a few words, enough to be a shorthand that I can look at it and say, oh, that story, that story, that story. I think it's a good idea so that when you get around to being able to record them all, which I hope everyone does, either record them or write them, that you'll remember them all. So here's one that just came back into my consciousness the other day. Not that I haven't thought about it all these years, but it wasn't on the list. And it's about our beloved friend, Yanam, who is not on this plane as of a few years ago, and very, very dearly missed by so many of us who were counted her among our best friends. So she and I were living in the Connecticut ashram, the one that before Yogaville in Virginia, and we'd had various, administrative roles over the years in various centers and in Connecticut, and there was a transition happening, and Gurudev called us in because he wanted someone to be the president of the ashram, and he said, why don't you decide between each other who it should be? And we got back to him, and each of us had said, well, Gurudev, I said, it should be Yanam. And Yanam had said, well, Gurudev, it should be Paraman. And although we had slightly different names in those days, which I have to mention, I usually don't out of etiquette, but I will refer to the fact that we were wearing robes because it's an important part of the story. So we go into Gurudev's study, which was right off the lobby in Connecticut, if some of you remember that well, I'm sure. And we were sitting with him, and he said, "So, which one of you should do it? Who do you think?" And we both made our strongest case for the other one to be present. And I think the other person was going to be programs coordinator or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And he said, "Well, how are we going to decide?" And we said, we don't know, Gurudev." He said, "All right, well, if that's how you both really feel, we'll just flip a coin." And he said, "Who has a coin?" And we reached into the pockets of our robes. He reached into the pocket of his robe that he was wearing. And none of us had any money, much less coins. And we told him so. And he looked and he said, 3 monks, of course. Of course, there's no money. So he had one of us go out to the desk, the reception desk, and borrow a quarter and come back so that we could flip it. And he flipped the coin, and we were all laughing heartily over the fact that there wasn't a coin between the three of us. And on that occasion, it meant that I ended up doing that job, just in case you're wondering how the coin flip went. I've become, addicted to coin flipping, possibly even before that. I'm not certain, but definitely ever since. I do a lot of it because it's just it's a very handy way when you aren't sure what to do. You just ask God and you say, you can easily guide me. I ask Gurudev, and he always gives the right guidance. So that was Yanam and I in the coin flip. And that brought to mind some other Yanam stories. So I'll tell you the other 2 that are on my list. The second one was a time when she was living in the New York IYI, and so was I. And she'd come down with pneumonia. So she was really pretty sick. And she'd had this terrible cough and trouble breathing for days. But, when you're in your 20s, you don't, worry about that as much, certainly not as much as people have in recent times. But she was sick as a dog, and Gurudev came to visit. And I said, and I was kind of in charge of the Institute at that time. So I took him to see Yanam in her sick room. And I said, Gurudev, wanting to champion her, my buddy. And I said, she's doing everything right. It just doesn't seem fair. She's fasting, and she's doing lots of pranayama, and all these practices to get better, and she's still not getting better. It doesn't seem fair. And he says, "Oh, so he says, so this is like is somebody who's wearing a vest, a sweater, and a jacket over that, and a coat over that, and you want to say, oh, because they're still cold, they should just take off the coat." That was his response to me complaining about her doing everything. He says, it's all helping, she just has to continue. And that was that. That was the end of my plea for justice. And always good to remember, though, because that's come up many times in my life where you feel like you're doing everything right and it's not working. And it's just like, well, what does that mean? You should give up or just keep going or just wait. She got better. So my third Yanam story is when she was the main coordinator for the whole Lotus dedication, which was the biggest, probably to this day, I'm sure, not probably, it was definitely the biggest event that the organization ever had. It was in 1986, and I'm sure it remains the biggest. We had thousands of people come here for the opening of Lotus, and we had this enormous event, incredibly complicated, and we spent a year planning it. I was technically called co-coordinator, which was somewhat of a joke. Our beloved Abaya, who's off playing with Yanam somewhere in heaven, if they haven't been reincarnated already, was the other co-coordinator. But Yanam was the real, point person. But we worked hard on it. We all did it. She the most, and year and a half at least of planning. And there was one aspect, there were many aspects that were incredibly complicated. Gurudev almost seemed to revel in making this thing more and more complicated. But the most complicated aspect of it, I would say that logistically for us, or among them, was the awards presentation. Gurudev had decided that he wanted to present awards to just about everybody who came, which, by the way, reminds me of the beginning of his Kailash Journal, which is a wonderful book that he wrote, I think back in the 50s, before he came to America, describing his pilgrimage to Mount Kailash, which is a tremendous trek on foot, a tremendous climb, almost dying, and in any case, in the beginning of that book, the very opening foreword has one of the greatest statements of his that I've ever seen. He said, life is an obstacle race. And he said, but unlike a regular obstacle race, there isn't just one winner. The Divine Mother wants everyone to win and has trophies for everyone. So he was in that Divine Mother mode and wanted to give out the Guru Tattva Ratnam Awards, which many of us have proudly framed or filed or wherever we keep precious things that we receive from him. That means, by the way, the name for the award means the jewel of the Guru's teachings. A jewel of the Guru's teachings award. And when we were compiling this list, it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, we have to give it to this person. We have to give it to that person. And certain people in some of these meetings, I won't single them out, were going, but that person, they smoke and they eat meat. And he says, so? That was his response. What does that have to do with, clearly, what does that have to do with anything? It's very instructive to be in these little meetings with him, many, many teachings that had nothing to do with being, as far as he was concerned, the jewel in his crown. He didn't care about any of that. He cared about the heart. So there was to be this big awards presentation, and it was the day before the Lotus was dedicated down here. We had this enormous event in Charlottesville, very complicated. We rented the then biggest hall in Charlottesville, the Performing Arts Center. And again, it involved dozens of people just planning it, because we had world famous performers like Carole King, who we know as Karuna, longtime devotee of Gurudev's, and Paul Horn and Paul Winter, very, very famous musicians, and many, many other dignitaries and world-class, Bharatanatyam dancing. It was a blowout concert as the lead up to the actual dedication. But it mixed into this all-day event up there was going to be this award presentation where I don't think we were going to get everyone on stage, but we were going to get a VIP subset of everyone who was receiving the award. I think that was the idea. And we had worked on this and worked on this and worked on it. And logistically, it was very complicated. Were they going to come up from the audience? And if you calculated the time out, it was going to take like all day to have everyone, they couldn't go up one at a time like they were getting an Oscar. That was the point. And we finally got it to where we could have a tableau of people sitting, and it would do the trick. And it was to be done somewhat en masse. The details aren't important. And people were basically having nervous breakdowns that were in charge of this. The stage manager, one of all our people, all our amateur folk that were running this with a lot of famous professionals coming in, were desperately trying to get every aspect of this to work. And it was the day before the event. We were up there getting this Performing Arts Center ready. And there was a call there was lots of communication back and forth with Gurudev. And there was a call. Yanam took all those calls. And Yanam was on the phone. And I was standing next to her. We were backstage. And she said, "Yes, Gurudev. Yes, Gurudev." And then she put her hand over the receiver, like on a regular old-fashioned telephone, 1986. And her eyes bugged out somewhat. She leaned over toward me and she said, "He wants to know if we can change the award presentation." Now, we had changed the award presentation at least 5 times in the lead up to this, and we had changed it a few days before. And each time the stage managers and the people who were supposed to make this happen were like going nuts. And, so she just very quickly, "Yes, Gurudev, yes, Gurudev," very respectful, puts her hand over the receiver and says, "He's asking if we can change the award presentation again." And in a flash, I'll describe this afterwards. So I'll just tell you what happened, and then I'll describe what actually happened. In a flash, I said, "Tell him no." She took her hand off the receiver. This is the level of communication, and the energy was flowing, and also we were, bosom buddies, and all of that was involved in this. And she took her hand back off and she said, "No, Gurudev." And and then she was talking, and I thought, what's going to happen? Smoke's going to, maybe smoke's going to come out of his ears, her ears. I don't know what's going to happen. And she's just casually talking, "Yes, we'll do this. And yes, that's happening." And it's very cordial, there's no tension at all. She hangs up. I said, "What happened?" She said, "I told him no, and he didn't say a word." And that was that. And we didn't change the award presentation, and it worked as well as it could be expected. So to back up and say what was happening, to me, that's one of the many incredibly precious moments with Gurudev, because when he would open a portal, so to speak, where there was this tremendous feeling of communication, and I knew that without hesitation that he just wanted to know the answer to that question. Honestly, it was an incredible feeling. There was no ego involved. There was no ego protection, protecting yourself. And there was like perfect communion, I would say. So you feel that connection so deeply that it affects you for the rest. It brings joy to me to this day, saying no to him. And it wasn't until many years later I was talking to another one of my bosom buddies, Reverend Jagannath, and he was describing that when he was one of the co-presidents of the ashram for a number of years, or I don't know how they called it, but he was one of the people heading the administration, and he said that Gurudev told him emphatically, he said, "I always want you to just tell me what you really think. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me what you really think." And, Gurudev would say, "What do you think of this?" And he would say, "I think it's terrible," or whatever. He told me a number of vivid stories like that. And it's like there was never a problem because he wanted somebody who was going to just do that. And I got a taste of that. That doesn't come to me as easily as to him. He's, that's nothing for him because he's such a lion of a person. So those are my 3 Yanam stories. Oh, and having mentioned pneumonia and the lungs, which reminds me of that someone tells a story about Master Shivananda that he said, what is the difference between, Master Shivananda once said to one of his disciples, what is the difference between ammonia and pneumonia? And a person was visiting the ashram in Rishikesh for a while up in the Himalayas and went off and really pondered this and decided that it was like the key to the secrets of the universe, and came back weeks, I think months later, the way I heard the story. And they said, "I've been meditating on that, beloved Maharaj. I don't understand. What is the difference between ammonia and pneumonia?" This actually happened. It sounds like I'm making a joke, but I have it on good authority that this actually happened. And Master Shivananda said, "The difference between ammonia and pneumonia? One's in the cabinet, the other's in the chest." So it was a joke. But that reminds me of my lungs. So I'll tell you that I used to have asthma from very bad childhood allergies, and then it developed into asthma. I'm happy to say that was completely reversed, and that's a whole nother story. But when it was first getting bad, we had our house built. Our house was completed in 1986, right before Lotus was. So it was filled up with Lotus workers, and it was an incredible, joyous time. We were housing, Jagannath and Janaki and many, many other people in those days before the hottest day in the history of Virginia. It went up to like 108 in the shade. And we put like about 3,000 people into circus tents out on the lawn next to Lotus. And you actually felt when you were sitting there like there was a blast furnace, like just blowing right in your face. I remember looking at Yanam when this was going on, when we're sitting there, this holy of holy, these world religious leaders from all the faiths are up there on this high platform, and they're doing all these dedicatory, amazing, actions that are going to go to sanctifying Lotus even more, as if that were possible, but it seems like it was, and to launch it in the best possible way. And while that's all going on, we're sitting next to one another. Every once in a while, I'm going to look over and say, "Can you feel this? Can you believe this?" It was so hot because everybody's bodies were radiating. So on top of the heat outside, and there wasn't a breeze, it was the middle of a complete drought. So why am I telling you all that? Oh, I'm digressing a lot tonight. So the asthma. So 1986, that's why I'm telling you, is when our house was built, and we have oak floors, hardwood floors. And when they put in hardwood floors, some of you know, if you get new construction, all that stuff is raw and it hasn't been varnished yet, and they lay it all down, and then they take these big sander machines that are enormous, and they sand the whole thing, and it creates something finer than talcum powder out of the wood, the sawdust that comes off when they sand it. Goes into the air, and it coats the walls, and it coats the beams, and it's everywhere they get it off the floor so that they can, do the final varnishing and sealing of the floor. But it's everywhere. And I was severely allergic to this, and I could barely breathe. And this was years before I finally discovered, that I could use an inhaler for this. No inhaler. So I was actually spending day and night actually consciously having to breathe, consciously, like, like that. It was horrible. So it got worse and worse. And we said, well, we're going to have to get some people in here to clean this, and I got to get out of here. So I went to Charlottesville, and I stayed at a hotel in Charlottesville while they were going to come and clean the walls. There's beams inside. All the top edges were covered. Talcum powder, like the finest stuff that got into everything, including my lungs. So I go and I spend a couple of days there. It's not going away. They had a sauna and a swimming pool, so I was taking a lot of saunas. My buddy Ramanan came and convinced the hotel management that I might be dead in my room because I wasn't answering the door because I was taking a sauna. He was afraid that I had died because he'd heard how bad my condition was. So we have a long kind of medical history together, the two of us, through various crises. So I come back. It's the housewarming day, and it hasn't abated. So I'm consciously wheezing, and I know that it's going to be much worse back there, but I'm so triggered. And now I'm going to go back down to the house. Gurudev is coming over with 150 of our closest friends, meaning the whole ashram, everybody, dignitaries that were visiting because Lotus was about to open. So people were coming from India and all over the world. And he brought Mr. Mahalingam with him, and all, famed industrialist and scholar. Anyway, they all descend on the house. And I said, well, I just said, I guess I'm not going to get to come to our own housewarming because I can't breathe, and I'm wheezing away, and I just resigned myself to that. And because I couldn't stay there coughing and gasping and wheezing in front of everybody. It would have been quite the distraction. Gurudev came to the front steps, huge crowd around him, as is typical on such an occasion, and they're doing a quick washing of his feet and offering flower petals, like a miniature worship service being done to him, as is customary on an occasion like this. Before he's to step inside, he's being garlanded. And as he steps up and stops there, and I'm at the top of the steps thinking about where I'm going to go so that I won't be a distraction. And gone, completely gone. Asthma just stopped on a dime when he was standing at the foot of our steps. And I was completely surrendered to going away. And I thought, wow, this is great. I get to be at the housewarming. He came in, and we had the most extraordinary occasion, part of which was that we have a beautiful, tiny, Hamsanandaji's been in it. Many of you have been in it or seen it. We have a beautiful little meditation room. It's the first thing we decided about that house site. And when your house is built down here by yogis, you're really lucky. So Vajran had built it. Another person of sainted memory, as I guess the Irish say, or whoever says of sainted memory, tremendous builder. And he built this very beautiful house from a Sangan's design. And the first thing we decided was where the meditation room was going to go. It had to face north. It had to be on the central axis. And because the Sangan is a brilliant artist and an architect, he, and a great yogi, he grokked all of that, and he set it up so that it was like the axis of the whole house. So before the house was even built, Vajran had set up like a little altar in the woods on the spot where the altar would be in the meditation room, and put a candle on it. And the whole time that they were working there, they would, light the candle, and all the workers knew about that worked for him. most of them were out and out yogis. Some of them were just out and in yogis, or in and out. I don't know. but Gurudev came into that tiny meditation room, which basically is comfortable for two people. And we use it all the time to this day for meditation. And Prakash, our beloved friend, performed the puja. So she's sitting in front of the altar. We're sitting behind her on the floor. We're all on the floor. Gurudev is sitting in the best chair that we could squeeze in behind all of that, facing the altar. And what I wanted to tell you about that, and why it's one of my favorite Gurudev stories, is when you have him at a guest for a puja like that, you give him he honors you, hopefully by you offer him the light to wave, the camphor light, which is like the ultimate moment of the puja, and he was gracious enough to do that. And what he did on that occasion was, not only did he wave the camphor light for a long time, long enough that Lakshmi had to have extra camphor to add to the camphor light, which we were told ahead of time, have extra camphor ready because he may want it. And he blessed that place like you wouldn't believe. I still can't believe to this day that I get to sit in that tiny room that we were in. And after I can't remember whether it was after or during, but at a certain point, he started chanting a bunch of chants that I've never heard before or since in all the years I was with him. And he just saturated that place. I pay attention to that stuff over the years, and I never heard any of these chants. It was amazing. So I guess he decided he better leave a very strong imprint for this guy. Maybe not for Lakshmi, but definitely for me. And that reminds me of going a little out of order of when I was in the Washington, D.C. IYI years before that, in the 70s, and he came to visit, and we were touring many places with him. I'll tell you another story from probably the same trip, but I'm going to save that for our fourth session together because it's an amazing story. So stay tuned. There's some great ones coming up. This is great too. We took him to the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, which is the largest Byzantine cathedral in America. It's called Shrine of the Americas. The patroness of the Americas is Guadalupe. When Mother Mary appeared to the peasant as Guadalupe, and you see all those images, and it's absolutely spectacular. By the way, if you're in DC, forget everything else and make sure you see the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. It's just amazing. So we're touring around inside. We'd been there many times. I used to love, when I lived in that institute for 4 years or so, to go there and meditate in the Lourdes chapel underneath in the basement, instead of like the main cathedral. And the upstairs, the main cathedral is unbelievable mosaics, and we're walking around, and Gurudev is commenting on everything beautifully. They have these amazing mosaic paintings, and on the ceiling was a giant mosaic so that you could see it from the floor of the cathedral looking way up. And it showed Mother Mary dancing on the head of a giant serpent. And he said, Gurudev said, he said, it's like Krishna, because Lord Krishna danced on the head of a serpent and subdued the serpent, and of a giant serpent. And so when he did that, I don't think I said this. I could have, but someone in our little group that we're lucky enough to be with him said he said something to indicate that they were basically the same, Krishna and Mother Mary, and somebody said yes, but Mary is feminine, because we tend to think of Krishna as he. And Gurudev said yes. He said Krishna is also feminine. That's all he said. And then we moved on to the next thing. Yeah, he said Krishna is feminine. And not even also. I think he said, yes, Krishna is feminine. And we walked around, and when you get to the front of the cathedral, forgive my with my Jewish upbringing, I don't know all the Roman Catholic names for the parts of cathedrals, but I guess it's the front of the nave, and it's the Sanctum Sanctorum there. The main altar is there, and there's these enormous lecterns, very, very fancy, that whoever the priest could climb up to, or whoever was going to speak or read scripture, and they had engravings on them. And after we went across the front and we passed the one lectern, and then we came to the second one, he stopped in front of it, and engraved on that lectern, it said, the seed is the word of God. And I was standing next to him, and he just turned to me and he said, "What's that?" And I said, Bija, Gurudev. Because the most powerful holy mantras that many are lucky enough to be initiated into are called Bija mantras. And Bija means seed. And this said the seed is the word of God. The word of God is what a mantra is. The sloka we did last week said the root of mantra is the Guru's word. Guru and God are, interchangeable. In fact, the Guru Gita says that over and over and over again. Lord Shiva is going, he has one passage where he goes 4 times in a row. He just says, the Guru is God, the Guru is God, the Guru is God, the Guru is God. Yeah. And like I said, what does the Guru tell you? You're the Guru, you're the Guru, you're the Guru. So what's that? He just says, what's that? I don't even think we stopped and read it out loud. We just stood there. We all looked at it. And I don't think I had read that before, even though I'd been to the shrine many times. I hadn't been right up there by the lectern. And we stopped and looked at seed is the word of God. What's that? I said, Bija, Gurudev. And then it was silent. And Gurudev turned, walked to the pews right at the front. He walked back several rows, and he went in. But you know how most people, when you go into like a row of pews with a bunch of people with you, would go down. He went in and sat down right at the end on the aisle. So we couldn't go past him without disturbing him. So we very naturally, he just choreographed all this without saying a word. He just sat, and we just filed into the next row of pews behind him, the little tour group, and sat down. Not a word had been spoken after that, Bija, Gurudev. And he started in full voice in the echoey nave of the cathedral. And there's hundreds of tourists always coming and going, and priests and nuns coming and going and setting up for the next mass up front, and we're right up front. And in full voice, he started chanting mother chants. And the reason I connect these responsively, we're doing our best to respond. And of course, I know a lot of mother chants. Well, I know a lot. I know what I know from what he taught us. in Inner Yoga Kirtan and on a few other occasions. And everything that he chanted were chants that I never heard before or since, but they were all mother chants. And they were incredibly powerful. And what happened, I mean, there was a little part of my mind thinking, well, I wonder whether we're going to get kicked out of here. This is pretty audacious. No, it was amazing. It was like the invisibility shield. The priests and nuns who were setting up didn't look around. The tourists just kept on touring, and he chanted in full voice. And I realized, he wants to bless the Shrine of the Americas, for all time. He wanted to imprint it with this vibration. It was amazing. We chanted for, I want to say, at least 10 minutes. It was amazing. So that's some of that tour. So here's another story. This is basically a one-line story. Here's a miracle story. These miracle stories were fun. He was standing in front of me in Shivananda Hall. You're in a big crowd of people. People are trying to get close to him. And so you're in a crowd of people. And he was standing in front and starting to slowly walk out, because when he would walk out, everyone wanted his blessing or to say something or give him a gift and get him to look at them. That's a whole dance that a lot of devotees are familiar with. The way he could, my friend Bhaktan talks about the amazing way that he could go down a row of people lined up on both sides like a processional gauntlet, and he could look at this one and greet them and bless them and look at this one and then turn around and you're the next one on this side. And he could just go like, amazingly, he could like go right past you like you weren't even there and do the next person. And it was just like, if you were standing there wanting it. I cultivated standing there and not wanting anything, which served me very well. And anyway, he was right in front of me in a dense crowd of people. Everyone was on their feet, and I was standing right behind him, and I looked down on the top of his head, and I thought, in a very, very calm way, I thought, well, this is odd, because I'm 5'7.5" in those days on a good day. And he's 5'11", and I was looking down. We were standing and I was behind him and I was looking down, and I wasn't levitating. Believe me, I was looking down on the top of his head. So remember the last time I told you the story of when he stretched and stretched and stretched to put the banner back up? And then he stretched like another 3 or 4 feet and managed to make it like nothing was happening. He did this like nothing was happening. Nobody was gasping and going, "Oh my God, Gurudev is shrunken." And it wasn't like I was having a vision or a hallucination. You might think so. It was much more remarkable like that. He could do these little things and nobody would even notice if he didn't want them to. So those are fun memories. Just to let you know that something's going on that you don't understand. So now I have a couple of things that I've, on my little list here, I've called favorite puja moments. I already told you one of my all-time favorite puja moments, the puja in our little meditation room at the housewarming. But I think this next one is probably, well, they're equal. There's 2 I'm going to tell you, and they're equally my all-time favorite puja moments. And the first was my favorite with me performing the puja, and my second was my favorite with him performing the puja. So my favorite of me performing the puja was, we had at Guru Purnima, which, is always the full moon in July. We're in Guru Purnima month. We're so lucky to be having these remembrances this month. I think it's just great. And we were having a group ornament celebration at the Connecticut ashram. We were in what was called the Roman Gardens. This was had been a summer mansion of this family, and they had they had so much money that they would import like ruins from Rome. There were like columns, and we're a bunch of hippie kids, or if we weren't all hippies, we might as well have been. Let's put it that way. And we're living in the people who built this place had brought an entire Japanese tea garden over, and then that became the site of the holy sannyas initiation years later. It was bizarre, and there was this huge circular Roman fountain, actual Roman ruins, and that we had one of the first really big interfaith services in, with all these religious leaders from around the world. And on this one occasion, as part of the festivities, we got to do Pada Puja, which is worship of the Guru's feet. And that means that lots of people, Gurudev gets to sit in a chair on an extremely hot Connecticut day. I'll admit, it wasn't as hot as the Lotus opening, but it was much more humid. So it was dripping hot. And he was at the top of this beautiful staircase, which were Roman ruins, sitting on this big throne that we'd set up for him. What we called a throne was, something that had been thrown together out of plywood and cushions and whatever. Later, we finally got something really nice, much later here in Virginia. So he sits up there, and people get to go up in streams and take a few flower petals coming up the steps and offer the petals, and a mountain of petals. Maybe some of you have seen these pictures or were there. I know many of you were there. Form on his feet. And he told us, "You think this is fun? You should try doing it." Sitting still like this does nothing for me, but we got it. I mean, you just wanted, it was a good excuse for you to get near that magnetism. That's what the feet are all about, is an actual passage of magnetic energy from the South Pole to the North Pole. You put your opposite ends of your magnets together and you get charged. That's what prostration is all about, as he taught us. So he's sitting out there. It's incredibly hot. And I was president at the time, so I'm kneeling on the steps and trying to make sure everything's going well. And I'm thinking, I'm dying. Sweat is running down under the clothes, and it's like so hot. And he's sitting up there in an even more exposed position in the sun, and incredibly hot. So in the middle of this ornate puja where everything is symbolic and you're offering food and light and incense and, little this, little that, it just suddenly occurred to me, I thought, God, I'd give anything to have a drink. And then I looked up at him and I thought, wow, he must be really hot because of the positioning and the sun and everything. We have to get him a drink. But it wasn't really set up for us to do that. And I grabbed a young fella who was even younger than me. I was in my mid-20s and he was maybe 17 or something like that. I just grabbed him and said, I can still remember, he's very beautiful looking. And I said, run over to the kitchen and get Gurudev some ice water. Now, Gurudev would never recommend drinking ice water. Forget that. I just felt like that's what's called for. Get him a nice glass. And I was entrusting somebody who was not the type of person who would do ritual worship. And he immediately saw the importance of the situation. He took off at a run, and he came running back finally to me. And he proudly maybe not proudly, but he handed me a big mason jar. You know what a mason jar is, right? Like you can peaches in, right? So, because that's all he could find when he ran back to the kitchen. So he wasn't able to come up with a nice glass or something from Gurudev's pantry that was designated to serve. It was a mason jar, just like a regular mason jar, and it was filled with ice water. I can't remember if I said to do the ice. I think that might have been his innovation. I'm pretty sure I told that wrong. I said, get him a glass of water. So he comes back with this big thing, and it's filled with ice and water, and he hands it to me. And I just look at this and I go, yes. And I just go up the steps in the middle of this big proceeding, and it's all very holy. And I hand it to Gurudev. Gurudev took the mason jar. And by the way, there was some, there'd been a lot of last minute grass mowing and stuff. And there were a few leaves of grass somehow had gotten stuck to the sweaty outside of the mason jar. I didn't have time to brush it all off. I just went up quickly, gave it to Gurudev. He took the jar and he chugged it, is the only way to properly say that. In one gulp, he took this big amount, and was probably a quart of water, and he just drank the whole thing right down and passed the glass back. And I said, well, all right, thank you. I've just experienced the essence of real puja. My favorite puja that he ever performed was he was on a backhoe doing a groundbreaking ceremony for Lotus. So nothing had been built yet. So this was, you were dedicating the ground. And he was going around and moving earth, and we were all down there and out in the field. And at a certain point, at the end of the proceedings, he took a bucket of earth. The idea was to dig a hole where the foundation was going to end up going. And he took a bucket of earth with the backhoe. He loved operating heavy equipment, by the way, it seemed. And he did it, let's put it that way. Seemed to be enjoying himself. And he, at the end of the proceedings, he climbed up into the backhoe, took the bucket of earth, and prayers had been said, incense had been waved, lights, this, that, and the other. And he scooped it up, and he dumped the bucket. It came tumbling out in the spot that he wanted. It formed a pyramid of earth. And the last thing that happened as the earth came out of the bucket was that it had scooped up a potted plant of flowers in full bloom. And they did a somersault in midair, or maybe several somersaults, and landed perfectly right at the pinnacle of the little mound of dirt. Oh, I said dirt. Sorry, Gurudev. Oh my God. Of earth. He never wanted us to say dirt about Mother Nature. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's some pujing. So, in no particular order except what I put down on this sheet, back in the very early 70s, Gurudev gave his first and only lecture in Berkeley at the height of, Berkeley protests and flower power and all of that. The Berkeley IYI sponsored it. We were incredibly excited to have him come and join us. And it was a tremendous success, so to speak, in the sense that there were, maybe 1,000 people in a large hall. It might have been the Berkeley Theater. I'm not sure. I don't think it was a church. Someone would know that. But in any case, Berkeley was filled with colorful characters. The whole city was, and there were sidewalk preachers, and many others. There was a fellow who was known as, I think he was known as Yoga Man or something like that. They all showed up. So Gurudev, we introduced him, we did the usual things, but the usual thing did not happen. People did not settle down to listen to his talk. As soon as he sat down on the stage, a coordinated effort by, I'll just use the term that was used in those days, they were called Jesus freaks, excuse the expression, but that's what they were known as, stood up in various places, the balcony, down front, and started shouting that Jesus was the only way, and shouting him down, not allow. They weren't going to let him talk, and they were quoting scripture and shouting and saying Jesus is the Savior. Yoga Man or Om Man, whatever his name may have been, Om Man. He was in the back, and he started shouting, Om, Om, the Absolute. And we're going, oh no, what's happening? This is a disaster. And he's shouting, and he's passing out printed sheets of pornographic literature. It was, and it had photographs, that had been hastily Xeroxed and had his message somehow, the Om Man, and he just kept shouting Om the Absolute, passing out these quite pornographic handouts in the back, and it was utter chaos. Most of the chaos was the balcony, the front, the side, all shouting about Jesus, and they basically felt that it was blasphemy for him to speak. He sat back very quietly, cross-legged as usual, and didn't say anything. Just sat there quietly. He had started to speak right before the eruption happened, and then he just settled in very quietly, and it was getting louder and louder. And at a certain point, some of the organizers, including myself, I'm pretty sure Vijay from San Francisco, IYI, we were in the back horrified, and we said, well, we got to put a stop to this. And this was, free speech Berkeley. We knew that we were just going to be thrown to the wolves as soon as we got up there and tried to silence the crowd. But we said, we have no choice. We have to do something. They're shouting down Gurudev. And so I and he and maybe several other folks, I can't remember, but I remember that we started up the aisles feeling like, this could not possibly go well, but there was no choice but to do it. And just as we started down the aisles to head up to the front to sacrifice ourselves, so to speak, for the angry mob, Gurudev leaned forward and he just said, "Excuse me." And the whole place fell silent because there was such power to the gentleness and quietness with which he said that. And then he started to speak, and they started to shout again, especially the Jesus freak in the front and the middle. And Gurudev looked at him and he said, "Would Jesus Christ approve of the way that you are behaving right now?" And the fellow just wilted right on the spot, fell back down into his seat and stopped shouting. And Gurudev, I'll never forget, said something that I basically never heard him say on other occasions. But he said, "I've just come to share my experience with you," he said. And he said, "I have seen God." And I don't remember what else he said after that, frankly. He didn't speak long. He didn't give like a whole talk like he normally would. And we were mortified that he had to end early. even though they didn't start shouting him down again. He said a little, and then he kind of wrapped it up. And when we got back to the Institute, we thought, oh no, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. And we got back to the Institute, and the phone was ringing off the hook. All these people were calling and saying, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I never saw, the way he stayed completely peaceful and had total humility in the face of, such violent opposition was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Over and over again, people were calling that it had changed their lives. Afterwards, Gurudev said, in a way, I will never forget Berkeley, which didn't make us feel great. So, yeah, and he never came and gave another talk in Berkeley like that. He visited us, but not for a public lecture. Once at Yogaville West in Ziegler Springs, Gurudev was speaking, and we were getting to some pretty high Vedanta, and he said something that sounded like it sounded almost like he was saying that there was something beyond Satchidananda, and but not explicitly. So I spoke up on a number of occasions. We would have the opportunity to just ask questions verbally and speak up, and I just was shocked, but by the way it seemed to be going, because Satchidananda, existence, knowledge, bliss is Satchidananda Brahman. It means the absolute, the highest of high. The ultimate reality. So I said, but Gurudev, I mean, there isn't anything beyond Satchidananda, is there? And he, of course, not meaning his name, meaning what Satchidananda is. And he said, oh, of course there is. He said, Satchidananda is still a concept. Yeah, not a lot of limitation to that, to our Gurudev. Once also at Ziegler Springs, Gurudev questioned the whole gathering of, we're all very young folks back in those days. And he said, why do you love someone? It was in the context we were talking about devotion to God and Guru, and it was a very bhakti kind of moment. Why do you love someone? And one after another, people started hesitantly at first, and then more and more, it was like a waterfall, started speaking up, and they would. I remember saying things, hearing people say things like, one of our brothers, who is particularly flamboyant, said, because every hair on my body stands on end whenever I'm in your presence, and went on and on like that. And Guru goes, no. Next. He didn't want to hear any of this flowery speech about why do you love someone? Why do you love the Guru? Why, it was implied. Why do you love someone? And he just kept quizzing us, and he rejected every answer. And that young, one of the youngest girls, I would have to call her there, Radha, spoke up finally after this long series of fancy, heartfelt answers sometimes, and she said, why do you love someone? Because you want something that they've got. And Gurudev, that's it. That's it. Yeah. And speaking of love, there was an occasion here in Connecticut ashram where there was a little project, a pretty big project put together of, we're going to share with Gurudev our heartfelt love and gratitude. Anyone who wants to should write a letter, and they were all being collected. I think it was by Shanti Norris, one of his secretaries. They were all being collected and being put together. I happened to be standing. I was meant to be in this spot when it was handed to Gurudev after the satsang as a gift. And it was in this very fancy binder, which I may or may not have provided amongst mine, because it was this archaic kind of binder that I loved, which is not important at all except to me. I like this binder, this type of binder that no one uses, but I had gotten into them when I was in college, not that many years before. So the binder was handed to him. I happened to be standing right there when it was handed to him. She said something very nice about what it was, and he opened the black cover, and he looked down. I was standing right there, so I looked down, and there was quite a stack of letters that I think everyone had handwritten them, and mine was on top. And if I do say so, I had poured everything into that. It was very heartfelt, and it expressed what I really felt about what he meant to me. And I was practically blown over just to be in that moment and see that my sheet was on top. I had no idea. He stood there and read it, apparently. And then he looked up and he said, "You have bound me with your love. You have bound me with your love." So that's why the binder matters. So I'm not editorializing a lot about these. I think that you all understand that these are like major energy transfers, initiations, life-altering moments when he says something like that. And here's one that's just fun, just as a little palate cleanser. When I was in the DCIYI, we gave a big retreat in Pennsylvania, and at a summer camp, and they had tennis courts. And I love tennis. I grew up feeling like if I just played tennis every day of my life, and I tried this out for a year or two, that I would always be happy. And another time in my life, I just thought, well, if everybody had a dog, we would always be happy. We just all have to have a dog. Tennis was real big to me. I love tennis. I love watching it today. I love playing it whenever I could. And there was some nice tennis courts there. So I got word to his secretaries and said, it was just crazy. It was bold, though. And I just said, if there's any way, I don't imagine that there is, but is there any possibility, I would just love to play tennis with Gurudev. Now, I didn't know whether he even played tennis, but we just put that out there, and word came back to me. He liked the idea. They came up with rackets. They came up with tennis shoes for him. He showed up at the court wearing his orange dhoti, which is like a wraparound sarong, like a robe, but seemingly even more awkward to try to play sports in, and barefoot. He said, Gurudev, there were all secretaries around, and then me and a couple of people who were the guinea pigs to play with him. And he said, I tried the shoes. He said, I didn't like that. He said, this way, he said, I can feel the court better with my bare feet. I can feel the court better. That reminds me, by the way, a little digression, that once when he was getting a private tour of the U.S. Capitol, somebody was giving, the way a tour guide gives you, and it was a devotee tour guide, but it was a real deluxe tour. And they said, see the way these steps and the marble here are all worn down, because for hundreds of years, all the legislators have walked right over that. Have you seen that in very old steps and pathway? It was worn smooth inside, and they said, "See that, Gurudev?" And he often wore slippers, little slip-on, not even shoes, and it was summer, so no socks or anything. So they said that he just very gracefully slipped his foot out and felt the marble with his bare foot. Yeah. So he could feel the court better without shoes. And he got out there and essentially started playing like a maniac. I never saw anything like it. And it was very clear that if he had played tennis, he didn't know the game as we know it. It might have been the first time he had ever played. I was just astonished when he was on the other side of the court from me. At one point, he came forward with such enthusiasm for a short shot that had just come over the net that he came racing forward barefoot in a dhoti with his borrowed racket and full out dove. This is an asphalt court, a green court, like at the US Open, it's asphalt. He like dives for it, like a star player might do in, on match point or something. And I can't remember whether the ball went over. That's not important. Probably might not have, but it doesn't matter. He dove and he went into a perfect forward somersault right at the net. So his head went down, he did a full somersault, and now his head is still forward towards the net, and he has his head down, and you could feel and hear the gasp from his secretaries and other well-wishers who thought, oh no, we've injured him. And he kept his head down on the court for what seemed like an eternity. And then he slowly raised his head like this. And he went, at least like that, laughing uproariously, like this was the funniest, most fun thing ever. He loved it. And then he and I got to play on the same side of the net against a guy that I knew well who was a real athlete, and nobody would mistake me for a real athlete. I was a decent Sunday player at tennis, but this guy was like a jock, which again, no way. So, but I was playing with Gurudev. We were playing doubles. Oh, and the doubles partner of the jock was this famous Supreme Court justice from South India that was an honored guest of Gurudev, Sri Kanakaratnam. But I felt like, well, Gurudev is my teammate, so everything I'm doing is for him. And, I could beat the two of them on the other side of the net. And so I felt like, oh, this is great. I'm getting to do this for Gurudev. And Gurudev's making shots too. And I'm, kind of winning a lot of the points. And we're really, and my friend, the jock on the other side of the net, seems more and more annoyed that, Powder Puff Me is beating him and his partner. And, we, in doubles, you like walk back and you discuss the shot. We weren't doing that. we didn't have strategy to discuss. But at one point he did that just the way you see it done in tournaments. And we're walking, so our backs are to them across the net. And we're walking back and he like turns to me and he says, it's not nice for us to win all the points. And that resulted in the most fun I ever had in tennis in my entire life. Very competitive, by the way. When I get into it, I get very competitive. And what I proceeded to do was to set up, it's easy to lose points, just hit it in the net or hit it out of bounds. But I knew that wouldn't give them the satisfaction of beating us. So I proceeded to engineer points for them to win and actually beat us. And it was the most fun I ever had. It's not nice for us to win all the points. It was just tremendous. Let them win a bunch of points. And I always related that to Gurudev would always say that if you win, you see the sad face of the person that you've beaten. But if you lose, you get to see their happy face. And it's better to lose, not to always win and just see the sad face. So it was great fun. Oh, and by the way, I mean, when he did that forward roll and everything, barefoot and, bare kneed and all that onto this hard court, there wasn't a scratch, nothing, I'm going to tell a few more, even though we've coming up on our time, or we're on our time. Jiva and I were once assigned by Gurudev in the Yogaville West days. There was a fellow that was known as Mauna Man, because Mauna means silence, and he was silent a lot. And he was a monster of a physical specimen. He was over 6 feet tall, and he had huge bulging biceps. And we used to use a lot of wood heat. Even though we were in California, it was very cold that first winter. So we were splitting wood a lot for these hastily made oil drum heaters that we'd had to make, because it was the coldest winter in the history of that area right when we moved in. So to these completely uninsulated, plywood walls that were like a 1/4 inch thick. It was quite a setup. And so he'd be out there splitting wood. We would all take turns splitting wood at times. But this guy was a monster, Mauna Man. He would just come and split wood. He wouldn't talk to anybody, but he would be wailing away so fast, and it would be like piling up like in a cartoon. Enormous amounts of wood. A beast, incredibly strong. Well, he would act erratically sometimes, and he had scared some special guest by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Gurudev told Jiva and I to go and speak to him in the middle of the night. He said, go and find him, because this incident had just happened, and tell him that if he doesn't leave, that you're going to tie him up and kick him out of the ashram and put him outside. I think there were some other instructions about calling the police or whatever, but it was mainly that we were going to tie him up and put him outside of the ashram. Now, Jiva and I had time to discuss this while we were searching for him, and we said, we couldn't imagine telling this guy. He literally, physically could tear us limb from limb. Jiva's athletic, but more than me, but nothing. Mauna Man, he had that crazy energy too. So we finally found him. It took a long search, and we're discussing how are we going to do this? And Jiva said, well, we're just doing this on faith. Gurudev said to do it, we'll just do it. So we finally found him. He was lying on his back in his tent. He was reading or something, so he still had a light on. We didn't have to wake him up. He had his head resting like this, wearing a short sleeve or might have even been a tank top shirt to make the effect more pronounced. Enormous, bulging muscles. And we walked in, and I think Jiva did the talking, and we delivered that message while we stood there. And I was thinking, well, this is interesting, because I've never been beat up, And, I might be about to be actually killed. And this is interesting. At least I'm with a good friend. So Jiva says, Billy, I think that was his name, Gurudev told us to let you know that we're going to tie you up and throw you out of the ashram if you don't leave, because you haven't been behaving properly. And Billy lay there like this. And at first I thought, this was like a scene in a prison yard, like he's mocking us or something. And he just said, well, I'd hate to tangle with you fellas. And he just got up very meekly, took his little backpack and left. And we looked at each other and went, whoa. So those are the kind of assignments we'd get in those days. Gosh. I'll leave you with another vision dream. And because we did that the other night, and I don't want to keep you too much past the end of time. I don't know, how long? 8:45. Yeah, I know 8:45, but, and it's past 8:45. Do you guys want to go another 5 or 10 minutes, or should we end right now?
Sure, let's go another however long you want.
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it.
We can do about 5 or 10 more minutes.
Okay.
But that's about it.
We'll do another 5 or 10 minutes. So when we had to sell Yogaville West, I was left in charge. One of my credits in my resume is that I was president of Yogaville West. The way that happened is the president left, and then the person who was president after the president left. A lot of people left because the place was failing and the septic system didn't work. There were all these problems. And finally, it was like, okay, you're in charge. Everybody else is gone. There was hardly anybody left. And so I was suddenly in charge. And Gurudev, because I was in charge of the money also, Gurudev wanted me to present a check register showing every check that had been written for months. So I had to hand type it, no computers in those days. And, I just kept the checkbook. I didn't have anything in the form of a report or anything like that. This is the 70s. So I typed it all out by hand, a 70-page report. I gave it to him, and he was lying back on a bed reading it with me standing at the foot of the bed. And he was questioning different things. And I was feeling really good, because it's good to be kind of questioned and blamed for things that aren't your fault for a change. And that's what was happening. A number of things that he brought up were really not my fault. So I felt like, this is nice, So I was just enjoying the energy of him being very strict with me and drinking it in. And he, at a certain point, he turned a page on page 35 or 40. And I had by hand put in a running subtotal at the bottom of each page, and then picked that up at the top of the next page. And then kept going. So he pointed, he's just flipping through these pages, 70 pages. He points to the subtotal at the bottom of page 35. I've just given this to him, by the way. And he goes, "That's wrong." And I looked at it, and there was no glaring way to know that, but it indeed was wrong, and got corrected on the next page. But he spotted that out of the thousands of numbers in the 70-page report. And so I thought from that experience that I had figured out what to do when Gurudev was really coming down hard on you, because I had relaxed and received the energy. And I realized that the energy of a bust, as we would call it from Gurudev, a harsh criticism, was really nothing but blessing energy. And you just had to lean back into that and receive it. And it was actually great. It was totally a blessing. So I had it all figured out, and I was in Connecticut sometime later, and Gurudev was just like really very unhappy about the way we weren't dealing with wild dogs that were coming onto the property, and we weren't supposed to allow them to be there, and we were supposed to do things that we didn't want to do, like throw little stones at them to drive them away, and we all like dogs, and but he had given us specific orders, so he was really going at it. And I think I was president at the time, and I said, well, I know what to do with this. So I just stared into his eyes and received this wash of energy as he got harsher and harsher. And I said, this is great. And this is where I'll end. And then I'll tell you the dream. He said, so I'm just staring and leaning into the energy. And he said, stop staring at me. And that was the end of that, having figured him out. So I'll leave you with a little dream that's more or less just one or two sentences. This is from recent years. I was in a big room with him, a big bright living room, maybe of an apartment or something like that. And a lot of people were milling around. And for some reason, I was in the middle of the room right with him, even though the devotees were all milling around. And he looked at me and he gave me a big hug. And he said, everyone's asking me the wrong question. And then he said, awake. So, sweet dreams. And I'll see you in a week. Enjoy Guru Purnima season. And we'll go into some more treasures next time. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Jai Sri Satguru Satchidananda Ji Maharaj Ki.
Jai. Jai Paraman Ki.
Jai Sangha. Jai.